Holly Bramley met Nicholas Metson while they were both studying in Lincoln. They were married 5 years later. However, what should have been Bramley's happily ever after quickly descended into a coercive, controlling relationship. Metson psychologically tortured his new wife, murdering each of her beloved animals. In March 2023, this culminated in one of the most gruesome murders in British history. This is the tragic case of Holly Bramley. Hi guys, welcome back. Today's case, I will tell you, there's not tons of information out there at this point. I'm sure in the future documentaries will be made and I'll be able to get more of the background notes about the killer. But nonetheless, I have really done my best to pull together all of this research to bring you this case. And I wanted to cover it because firstly, I think it explores some real red flags in relationships, and that's always helpful. But also, when I think about Holly Bramley, I think about this lovely, caring, compassionate, non-conflictual woman, somebody who had a life ahead of her. And she is the poster girl for pleasant, the poster girl for nice. And yet still, here we have these individuals whose absolute beautiful traits, the things that make them the wonderful human they are essentially used against them by a coercive manipulator. When it comes down to our psychology, we each have our experiences. We each relate to different people, different circumstances, different environments completely subjectively. But for the most part, when we are people with character traits that are positive, in most environments, that's a real big selling point as far as the person that we are, and it makes people want to connect. But if we are around an individual who can see that we just have this empathic, compassionate nature, they see that as a fracture. They see that as a flaw to some degree, somewhere they can insert themselves and exploit you through the manipulation that they use towards you. So the very thing that makes you the great human being that you are, inevitably at times can lead to your downfall. And I genuinely think the Holly Bramley case represents this fully. If you're new to my channel, I release my content on a Wednesday and a Sunday, so if you like true crime and you like deep dives, this is the channel for you. I am always consistent, so if you like crime and consistency, make sure you either subscribe, if you do, get your notifications on, or at least return to watch more of my cases, because every single one of your views really does count. Thank you very much. As ever, a massive shout out to my Patreon subs. You keep me going. Same with my YouTube membership. And I am definitely doing more videos that are going to be on my main channel as well. They won't be as consistent as my Wednesday and Sundays, but I promise that they will be there. Also, if you want to get some of my amazing merch, which I love, actually you are doing, I'm loving the fact that Chase is doing so well. You asked for Chase merch, my cat merch, and here it is. Don't fuck with cats. And actually that's something that I think so many of us can acknowledge and relate to. In fact, here he is, the man himself, preparing for today's true crime video. Let's talk about this unbelievably gruesome and disconcerting and deeply traumatic case. So who was Holly Bramley? She was a triplet, so that in itself speaks volumes to me. To be a triplet, you were essentially a statistical miracle. To be one of three? And I'm not going to pretend that bringing up triplets would be a simple experience. I have one child now, and she's absolutely delightful. But, let's get her out of there, she's a little bit on the demanding side. She's like, I need this, and you're going to give it me now. I think babies are beautiful, aren't they? But they're kind of a little bit psychopathic in their nature because they need to be. They need to be like, it's all about me, all about me. So when you've got three of them, it's going to be challenging. But I also feel that Holly's mum is just one of those human beings that's born to be a mother, because Holly grew up as a triplet and is one of 13 siblings. So it seems like she has a very big family, but like I said from the get-go, she's basically a miracle. And I don't pretend to know the relationship that Holly has with her siblings. What I can say is I've read their statements and I've heard them speak, and she was absolutely adored. And I can imagine that if you are a triplet, there is something so unique, so connecting for you, that that is going to mean that you have really close relationships. So she grows up in the Lincolnshire town of Holbeach. It's a quiet market town. She attended William Stukely Primary School and George Farmer Secondary. And as I said, she got a big family. So it's going to be a busy household. And one of the things about being a human being, being brought up in a large sibling group, is you have to learn to recognize that your needs are not always that important. And I don't mean that you are not absolutely incalculably important to the people who love you in your family. I'm saying there is a level of need that can be met when you have a big family, and you learn that you have a place, and that's not a bad place. But what it can also do is it can make you accept that other people's needs at times are more important, and that's really helpful in general day-to-day life, because we need to realize that we are not the center of the universe for everybody. But equally, when we have that within us, that ability to put other people's needs first, and a lot of you will relate to this, sometimes that gets exploited by people who come into our world and see that willingness to put that person first as a weakness. And therefore, the thing that you are quite happy to do for other people, and it works well because they do it for you in return, gets used against you. And this person takes from you more and more and more and more. And that's what predators do. And that's absolutely what we're talking about where Holly is concerned in her relationship that we're going to look at today. So Nicholas Metson, the antagonist, the killer in this case, he and Holly Bramley, they met at Boston College. That was in Lincolnshire in 2016. They began a relationship on the 27th of October 2016. They then got engaged on the 25th of October 2018, and they were married on the 11th of November 2021. And I've seen a picture of Holly in her wedding gown, and you can see that she's really beautiful. She's absolutely the blushing bride, and it just looks like that box standard photograph of two people about to start an incredible journey together, and hopefully a successful journey together. They live together in a flat in Shuttleworth House, Lincoln. And Holly is described by her family as being a very vibrant, a very happy, a very affectionate person, very close to her family, very much a loving part of their connected group. So from the outside looking in, people see Holly as a really wonderful human being who very much is family orientated, at least until she's with the man that we're talking about today, the man who ultimately takes her life. Now, in a post on Instagram, Holly gushed about her husband, saying, "Being with him, I've changed in a lot of ways. He's supported me through everything and done so much for me. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to forget about him because of how much he's done. He means the world to me and always will." Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that what she's saying in those words is not entirely true at the time she writes them. What we know about coercive controllers, domestic abusers, they fall into different categories. It's not always a sheer stereotype that you can draw. But from my experience of working in this area, I can tell you that one of the key rules of the perpetrator playbook is to absolutely love bomb. It's to make the person that you're in a relationship with feel like they are being revered. You make that person feel like you've never been seen in the way that they're seeing you. You make that person feel that they've never been as visible as you're viewing them. You make them believe that you see every single one of their good points and you illuminate them. And you do that hard for a short period of time. So maybe 6 months, 12 months. You really work hard on making them feel that they are the most important person in your world and that you see their true qualities like no one else has ever seen. And so by this point, they genuinely believe that you love them and also that you want what's best for them. And like I said, the alluring quality is that you have seen in them something that no one else has seen. And so they're now falling for you hard and fast. So there's that connection. They've got this beautiful history where you've made them feel super special. They're putting posts on Instagram or Facebook like this because basically this is the work that you do as the perpetrator. You initially make them believe that they are your world and you will do anything for them. And therefore, it's very easy for this person to have never felt that they've been cared for this way and to want to share that information with other people. But of course, what's happening during this period of time is The coercive control, the predator is learning a lot about you. And they're learning about your weaknesses. They're encouraging you to talk about their problems. They're encouraging you to talk about all the things that might have been wrong or problematic in your life. They're encouraging you to talk about family history. Why? Because if you think about the long game interviewing tactic, you're figuring out the weaknesses in your partner's experience. You're figuring out the relationships that you can undermine. You're figuring out what it is that they are fearful of and how you can therefore exploit those fears down the line. It's a very manipulative, very clever, long game, because a year down the line, all that information, all that data, you're going to be able to use against them. And it's going to really help when it comes down to doing things like isolating that person from the people that they love. It's said by Holly's family that after she met Metson, that it was basically the beginning of a very rocky road of domestic abuse. So Holly does start to realise that Metson is actually relatively coercive and controlling, and this seems to get more and more problematic. Now, when somebody recognises that an individual is coercive and controlling, and they tell their family that they feel that there are elements of coercive control, that doesn't mean at the point that they are unhappy. So you can be in a relationship which you know has particular elements and traits that fall into the category of coercive and controlling. And you can talk to your family about that and say it annoys you and say that you want it to change. It doesn't necessitate that that's your experience full time, which is why people go back. Because somebody could be coercive and controlling for 2% of the time, and therefore it's manageable. It's when it gets to 20% of the time, it becomes more of a nightmare, and so on and so forth. So there's early signs, they're there, but it won't necessarily mean that Holly is truly understanding the potential danger that she's in. If only we could encourage people in those very early stages with those very big red flags, get them to remove themselves from relationships. But that's not how love works, and that's not how relationship works. I would say Metson is your classic psychopath. I appreciate the fact that this story is being told demonstrates that there is an individual with antisocial traits. That goes without saying, because I wouldn't be telling this story otherwise. But I'm saying he is in my opinion, pure breed psychopath. And the reason for that is he doesn't just enjoy tormenting Holly, because she, bear in mind, as far as he will be concerned, is his property. He can do whatever he wishes to do with her. It's a game to him, I would say. And he likes playing with her feelings in the most demented and diabolical of ways. So at this point, we've got this gorgeous 26-year-old Holly who's trying her best to be married, trying to be loyal to her husband and give him what he wants, because understandably, she's now committed to this relationship. And yet all he is doing is thinking about ways of destabilizing who she is by ruining the things that have meaning to her. So he murders her pets. Now just think about the McDonald triad. We always look at animal torture as one of the triad points. Whenever I've worked with young people who kill animals, and believe me, I worked for 20 years, and I can tell you, it is rare that you get these young people referred who are murdering animals, because it is a trait that is unusual and is usually a very big predictor of violent behaviour in the future. And he is taking her pets, so pets that actually mean something to his wife, his new wife, and he actually puts her new puppy in a washing machine. And he didn't just put the puppy in a washing machine so that that beautiful animal, that sentient creature, would die. He left the body of that puppy dead inside the drum whilst it was still spinning so she could find it. At this point, I am going to say it could have been likely that I'd have gone to prison for some kind of serious manslaughter charge, because if I discovered that my husband had done that to my dog, I do not think I could have controlled myself. And that says something about Holly, doesn't it? Because I swear to God, a lot of us will relate to this. I've got that top saying, don't fuck with cats, because we all know where that comes from with a documentary, with that title, and how people were so motivated and moved by animals being tortured in videos. It promotes a feeling that's so primal in so many of us that we really don't know whether we'd be able to contain ourselves. But she does. And I would imagine that partly that's because of her compassionate nature, and she's not somebody who's conflictual. But I think the other side of it is it's fear. She thinks to herself, my God, he's taken my puppy, he's tortured it, killed it, and he's left this dog as a message to me so that I know what might happen to me if I dare to defy him. But like I said, That guy is super lucky that I wasn't present in that room, because the whole court case may have been very, very different and I might have been at the centre of it. Also, he murdered her pet hamsters, and again, stone cold psychopath. The methods that he murders these animals is just grotesque. So he puts them in a food blender, he puts them in the microwave oven, so we can imagine the incalculable level of pain that these animals have to endure. And on one occasion, Holly actually ran to the police station with her pet rabbits to escape Metson. I'm not going to be negative towards the police in the context of saying, oh, they should have done more, because at the end of the day, she went there with these rabbits saying something terrible might happen to them and that she's trying to get away from this abusive man and they didn't do more, because it isn't arguably something I can truly comment on without seeing exactly what played out in that moment. What I would have hoped was that if somebody walked in to a police station with the rabbits saying, my husband does things like liquidize and microwaves animals, oh, and by the way, killed my new puppy, I'd be like, girl, we're going to go into an interview room, we're going to have a sit down, we're going to get a domestic violence officer to come and deal with you, and we are going to talk about the reality of what you are looking at, because this is a high-level predator, he's likely a psychopath, and you need to run. I think that that conversation is the only conversation you should have with somebody at that point. Ideally, contacting the family, as long as she's okay with that, and getting somebody to come and collect her and bring her to safety. Also, getting an officer to go around and have a very strong conversation with Metson, who seriously is a threat to society. Now, unsurprisingly, we get to about 16 months after they got married and it's on the verge of ending. So this is in 2023. Holly at this stage is obviously recognising that she cannot endure this kind of life, because imagine being in a scenario where everything that has meaning to you is going to be destroyed. And then imagine having a family. Because if Metson can murder these animals in the most brutal fashions and do it as a punishment towards her, then what happens if she has a kid? At the end of the day, that's the perfect weapon, isn't it? If it can destroy her any further, it would be about taking the life of the child. So I imagine that Holly is having all of these ethical and moral dilemmas and discussions within her own mind. But also, we have to remember, he has been highly controlling, highly coercive, highly threatening, and she's probably absolutely terrified of him. Also, he's a massive manipulator, so he's probably half of the time convincing her that she's somehow to blame for all of this. That's what domestic violence perpetrators do. I wouldn't have had to do this if you hadn't done that. That's the way that they operate. And if any of you are listening to this and you recognise that, if you've got a partner who's consistently deconstructing your sense of self, making you reason with unreasonable, making you question yourself on every single level, get out. That's the perpetrator playbook. Confuse, isolate, destroy is how they operate. Now, the last sighting of Holly actually alive was when she was returning to her flat on the 17th of March. So CCTV captures her returning. She was actually seen holding a plastic bag, and apparently that plastic bag contained fish and chips for both her and Metson's tea. So here we are, seeing this woman who's desperately unhappy, who's clearly in a terrible space and place with this man, and yet she is bringing him food. It's so distressing to imagine that even at a point where she's clearly very unhappy and clearly afraid, she's still being that dutiful wife. The police end up getting called to the flat on the 24th of March 2023, and the reason for that is there is concern over Holly's welfare. So on the 25th of March 2023, the police go over to do a welfare check. At this moment in time, they are immediately greeted with something that really concerns them. So first of all, there is this overwhelming smell of ammonia and bleach. Also, there was a towel on the floor in the kitchen and there was blood-stained sheets in the bathtub. Police found a recent attempt at redecorating and cleaning. They also were able to spot a number of large dark stains on the floor in the main bedroom. At this point, you're going to think there's a crime scene played out. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if you open my front door, at times, you may be met with a smell of cleaning products. I'm one of those all or nothing people, me. I'll suddenly have that urge, like a nesting experience, and I'll be like, I just need to completely clean the house from top to bottom for absolutely no reason whatsoever, because tomorrow it will be equally as filthy as it is today because I have so many people in my house. But I'll just get on it, right? And there will be a lot of smells coming out of my home that are positive, a lot of nice scents, right? Never would you open the door and be like, whoa, what's that ammonia? Because in a residential home, you don't need loads of bleach. It's just not the way it works. It's as simple as that. But then add to that the fact that there are dark patches that look like bloodstains. Add to the fact that this guy's redecorated. The police are going to immediately be concerned for the safety of Holly, and rightfully so. Now, of course, they ask him what's happened, and Metson then stoops so low as to show the police a bite mark on his forearm and says, basically, Holly's been abusive to me, and she's one of those people who's basically a silent perpetrator. Nobody knows that she's doing it, but this is happening to me. So he's got this bite mark, and that's his evidence for her abusing him. Now, I just want you to contextualize that. If we were in a scenario where somebody had been abused, and indeed perpetrators do at times bite their victim, indeed when it comes down to children being abused, bite marks are one of the big red flags because it is a way a perpetrator will often abuse children. However, if you're talking about a bite mark on someone's forearm, it doesn't take, I don't know, Sherlock Holmes. Poirot isn't required. You don't need Columbo walking in his jacket, looking a bit dishevelled to describe what's happened there. Anybody with an ounce of logic and common sense knows if you have a bite mark on your forearm, it's because the only thing that the person that you were harming could do was to turn their head and bite you. No abuser runs over to somebody, gets somebody's forearm and bites it. And I'll tell you why. Because if you run over, grab somebody's arm with your teeth, you are completely vulnerable to what they do. So for example, let me just show you this. You put your teeth around my forearm here. I'm going to take my other hand. I'm going to smack you around the head. Equally, when you're biting me there, I'm going to knee you in your chin, your nose, your head. So it would make you vulnerable. It makes no sense whatsoever. The only reason he would have that mark there is a defensive injury, end of. But he then says that the reason that Holly isn't actually present is she'd basically left home with a local mental health support group on the 19th of March and he hadn't seen her since. Because that's what happens in relationships. If I'm not waking up every other month to my husband just having gone off somewhere without me really knowing where whatsoever, in a time where our digital footprints are so enormous that from moment to moment you could have an itinerary of exactly how you've lived for the rest of your life, just dictated to you by your phone. Apparently, he's just been like, yeah, it's fine, she's just gone off with a group of people, nothing to see here. The police at this point are really concerned. And they realise that he's lying to them and that he's told lots of lies to officers. And they end up going back to conduct another search of the flat. At this point, they ask again, where is Holly? And Metson says, she might be hiding under the bed. He literally jokes. She might be hiding under the bed. Seriously, you can imagine, can't you, how the police are feeling in that moment in time. Also, when somebody says something like that, I wonder whether there's an element of truth in some of their words. So Metson keeps Holly's body in the flat for a period of time. And I do wonder, were parts of Holly potentially under that bed? So it's a half-truth. And it's the arrogance and the narcissism of him coming across in this moment where he's toying and playing with the police. Again, like he's dealing with some kind of game that he only knows the rules to. So the police are clearly desperately concerned about Holly and at this point are certainly considering that some foul play has occurred. But then we get to the 25th of March and this is when it is absolutely confirmed. So this is more than a week after Holly's last scene, which will have been a week of excruciating agony for her entire family. Sadly, a walker makes this really grim discovery. He noticed plastic bags and a bag for life floating in the River Witham at Bassingham, and it just caught his eye. It just looked a little bit outside what he was used to seeing in that place. And first of all, he thinks that he can see remains and he believes they must belong to an animal. And then he realizes to his absolute horror, no, I can see a human hand. At this point, police divers are called and they were actually incredible. They were really incredible because they really worked hard to bring Holly home. And I say that because unfortunately she had been dismembered. It's as simple as that. There's no easy way or nice way of saying this. And they managed to recover 224 body parts belonging to her. Unfortunately, some of her body parts, including her heart, were never recovered. But even though That is absolutely macabre and horrendous to have to say. And even though her family didn't get her back whole, at least they got most of her body back, because it doesn't give the sense of closure to the family at all. But it means that they know that wherever they lay her to rest, she is there. They had her for the most part. Like I said, it's harrowing that certain parts weren't found, but most were recovered. And I really do hope that that gives the family at least some level of feeling that they got their girl back. Now, understandably, there's only one suspect in this case. It's as simple as that. We all know who's done it. He's banged to rights as far as I'm concerned, just from what they've seen at the house. But they have to build a case. It's as simple as that. When you're doing an investigation, even though I do genuinely believe in certain circumstances, it should just be, let's avoid the court case, just throw them into this hole and feed them maybe a little bit of bread and occasionally some water for the rest of eternity. That kind of thing, I feel, would be an appropriate punishment. But that's not the way the legal system works over here. I think in Russia it comes close to what I've just said, but not in the UK. So after the police clearly establish what Metson's told them about his wife's disappearance was a lie, at this point they know that he's trying to pull the wool over their eyes for a reason, and so that gives them enough room to arrest and charge him with her murder, and also perverting the course of justice, because he's lied about her going off with a group of people from a mental health unit. Also, he said that she'd gone off to live with drug users. So he's just inventing these ludicrous statements and also trying to do reputational damage to Holly. There is no way she was involved with drugs. There is no way that she's ran off to live in some kind of drugs den. It's absolute BS. But he wants to do as much damage to her as possible to deflect the guilt from him. The pathologist has a pretty big job when it comes down to trying to figure out what actually happened to Holly. It took that pathologist, who was somebody who worked for the Home Office, over 13 hours to examine everything. The dismemberment was so enormous that, in truth, they couldn't actually establish an exact cause of death. But it's likely that Holly was stabbed at least 4 times in the bedroom before she was moved to the bathroom, where then she was actually dismembered. And her remains, they believe, were then stored in the kitchen larder before being placed into bags, which is absolutely harrowing. But I imagine that the blood stains that were found, that's why they've been able to hypothesize that she was stabbed this many times. And it is just beyond me to imagine that when the police were coming around to ask questions, her body was literally likely stored in the larder, and that he had taken such time dismembering her body. Because if you just think about the amount of cuts that were made, when you consider the time and the gore, I cannot help but believe that he enjoyed doing it. I cannot help but believe he felt that he might get away with murder, and it wasn't just about killing Holly. It was about the dismemberment and the psychological gratification that he received from doing that. The investigators get lots of CCTV footage, and again, at this point, they are able to actually show Metson wearing a rucksack, also using the flats lift, also a Morrison's shopping trolley to move bags from the 14th floor to the ground floor. That was in the early hours of March the 25th. So why is he making all these trips? Clearly he's moving parts of Holly's body again and again. They were then placed in Metson's yellow Peugeot car. They also do a search history on his laptops, his phone, etc. And one of the things that they find is that after he murders his wife, he draws £50 out from a bank account. He's literally stealing from his dead wife that he's just murdered. Also, he does the classic internet searches that no one with an ounce of forensic sophistication would ever do. But it seems that these narcissistic psychopathic killers ain't got the memo on this stuff. But he literally searches the internet for how to get rid of a body. What benefits can I get if my wife dies? Sorry, I can answer that. Oh, can you? I just want to know, what benefits can I get if my wife dies? Well, in your case, it's if you murder your wife. Yeah, if she dies, I might have murdered her, but what benefits can I get? Well, the benefit is we get to send you to a Russian prison with all of the worst serial killers in Russia. And let me tell you, some of those I think are worse than any of the ones I've ever covered so far on my channel. And we just leave you with them. That's what we do. That's the benefit. That's the main benefit. That doesn't sound like a benefit. No, it's for me. It's the benefit's for me. Yeah, it's a great benefit for me. I feel benefited just thinking about that situation play out, Nicholas. So off you pop. Vladimir, collect him. Anyway, obviously that isn't what happened, but that's how I feel and wish things went sometime. And I know there'll be people out there going, no, Emma, rehabilitation, restorative justice, reform, all of these things are really important and powerful. I know. And for some people they work. But Nicholas Metson ain't one of them people. He's absolutely never going to be safe to walk the streets, end of. I don't care about him being treated well. Holly didn't get treated well. As far as I'm concerned, the animals that he murdered didn't get treated well. So I'm not sure that I need to offer him the human right of that experience himself. Everybody has their own opinion. You're all entitled to them, although a lot of you do tend to agree with my thoughts and sentiments on this. So he's searching for how to get rid of her and also what he can do to benefit himself financially now she's gone. Also, he asks, can someone haunt me after they die? Again, Nicholas, I love the fact that there is this tiny pinprick of conscience, isn't there? Ooh, now I've killed her, can she haunt me? And the simple answer is maybe, but maybe that tiny prick of conscience, once incarcerated, will infect and infest every atom of your being so that she does indeed haunt every moment of your life from now on. And now, as she bestows her power over you because you've no freedom, you eventually will feel haunted by Holly. That's my hope. That's all I can say. But this is what he's asking. He also says, does God forgive murder? And I know, guys, according to the Bible, he does. I'm not sure, though. I don't know whether he does. I think that God might be like, oh, thanks for the apology. Just step to the left. Oh, it's very hot. Yeah, just step to the left. It's really hot here. I'm not feeling like it feels exactly how I'd expect it to be if I'm being forgiven. No, I forgive you. I forgive you. But unfortunately, 1.462 of the angel code says that even though I forgive you, you still have to go and spend 95,000 years in hell. And then after that, we'll see whether you really have repented. That's the kind of thing that might happen. Maybe he does forgive, just in a very many years' time, millenniums' time. Yes, eternity is a long time, so I imagine that he might be able to suggest that a repenting at leisure of such an individual should take place somewhere hot. Another thing that Metson does that, again, I find deeply disturbing and demonstrates the fact that he was not intending to get caught for this killing is that he used his wife's Facebook account to message her friends to try to trick them into believing that she's still alive. So he's messaging them, suggesting that she's fine and saying that she's moved to Manchester. This is the story about where the drugs play in. He says, oh yeah, she went to Manchester to be with these people who are into drugs. This is just totally left field, totally outside the realms of reality for her and the actions that she would usually carry out. And of course, her family love her. And she loves them. Yes, he's isolated her from the family. Yes, he's controlling her in many ways. But no, if she was going to go anywhere, she'd go home to her family that love her. So he's trying to create this fabric of lies to try to escape justice. Another person, however, that is culpable in this story is Joshua Hancock. So in the early hours of the 25th of March 2023, Metson sends a message to Joshua Hancock, who's a childhood friend. So we already know that Joshua Hancock has got no taste in friends at all. Anyway, he gets this message, and Hancock at the time is living in Walnut Close. Waddington is a bit older, he's 28, and Metson offers him £50 in return for help with a job. Apparently, Hancock was like, you're okay. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that Hancock is complicit in the murder that I've just talked about. I'm talking about Hancock being a deplorable. I'm talking about Hancock being a hideous excuse for a human being. Because we all need a bit of cash now and again, particularly at times at the moment. People are short, money's tight. Somebody offers you 50 quid. If you need it, you're going to likely say yes, but you're going to ask what the job is. If you get told, well, the job is to dispose of my wife's body, it's going to be a hard no. It's going to be a hard no followed by 999 call. The guy that I grew up with has lost it and has killed his wife. That's how it goes. But it doesn't work that way where Hancock's concerned. So he just arrives, and then the pair end up driving with bags full of Holly's remains to the village of Bassingham, 10 miles away basically from where they lived, and then they dump them into the river with them. So obviously Hancock knows exactly what is in there, and he just goes ahead and does it. So on the 5th of April 2023, he gets arrested and charged with the disposal of a body with intent to obstruct a coroner. And Hancock actually did admit the charges. He also admitted some unrelated offences of attempting sexual communication with a child and drug offences. So let's not let him out ever as well, because anybody who's trying to have sexual communication with a child, I don't think they're salvageable as a human being. Genuinely, I do not believe child predators can ever be rehabilitated. There'll be some do-gooders out there going, oh, that's not true. Yes, they can. I disagree. Politely and respectfully, I disagree. I think if you have a predilection where you want to have sex with kids, that's because you want to have sex with kids. It's not because you want to have sex with grown-ups. So anyway, I digress. I get a little bit triggered by the old child sex offences. So he's surrounding himself, isn't he? Metson surrounds himself with not rights. Metson surrounds himself with dark, malevolent human beings. And I think if we were to look into his background, we'll see a lot of this kind of connecting. And unfortunately for Holly, who's the light in this piece, who's actually a good human being, who's a loving person, who could have made his life better, she falls into a relationship with this man that has such murky undertones. It's distressing to even conceive of her starting the slow process of realising the kind of lair that she's ended up in. The trial begins on the 23rd of February 2024. Metson initially denies murder. Oh no, I didn't do anything. I think you did though. No, I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything. I think that you did though, and I'll tell you why I think you did. No, I didn't. I didn't do anything. You killed her puppy. I did that. I did do that. You liquidized her hamsters. I did that as well. But I didn't kill her. We found blood all over the flat. You're on CCTV carrying her body. Literally, your accomplice to disposing of the corpse said that they did it with you. Yeah, that does sound, it's quite incriminating really, that, isn't it? So, of course, once the trial's about to begin, he does decide that he's going to become guilty at that point. But not, of course, before all the work and money has gone in, because he was initially going for a not guilty. And we all know why he's gone guilty. It's because he'll get a lesser sentence. This guy is self-motivated. He's selfish. It's all about him. He's egocentric to the core. He's sadistic to the core as well. So he's thought initially, well, maybe I could just play this game, because obviously he believes he's superior to people. He thinks he's very bright. He's not, but he believes it. So he's imagining that maybe they'll be able to create this situation where there's reasonable doubt that he hadn't actually murdered her. But as the cards stack up, and you can imagine the defence attorney just being like, listen, you are banged to rights. We have so much incriminating evidence. You are not going to get anything but a guilty reality. So he's probably then done the maths and thought it's going to be better for me in the long term to say I'm guilty, because it's going to eventually mean that my sentence is not as lengthy as it would be if I go not guilty and then get found guilty. The trial begins at Lincoln Crown Court. It begins on the 5th of April 2024. The judge is Simon Hurst and the prosecution is run by Gordon Aspden. Both Metson and Hancock were actually tried at the same time. Metson was dressed in a grey tracksuit, so he hadn't got the memo about turning up looking respectful for the judge. Also, remember, Holly has a big family, a loving, lovely, big family, and there was a large number of that family there. They were there to give her legacy. They were there to see justice served. They were there to be her voice, her presence, and I love that. I love the fact that this man who had caused such suffering had to be in that courtroom with the feeling that would be projected by all of those numbers. We all know how it is when there are people around us that have feelings that are negative towards us. Even one person in a room who has negative feelings towards us can almost feel like you're drowning in the feeling that you experience. Well, just think about numerous people all directing that feeling onto you. He must have felt it, even though I don't believe this man has got a conscience really, and I don't believe his empathy level will really prick high at all. You cannot escape the thickness of that enveloping of a feeling that's just being projected onto you. And they're there because they want to make damn sure that he knows she was loved, that he knows she's still present in her absence. And that included actually Bramley's mum and 12 of her siblings. So they were all there. They all showed up. And I just have such a sense of awe that every one of them came. Such a sense of a visual representation and a emotional narration to some degree of who Holly was and what she meant, that every single one of them was there. The court heard about Metson's criminal history. So in 2013, he'd received a referral order for a domestic assault on a previous partner. So he's got an MO for being domestically violent. 2016, he's given a community order for 3 offences of disclosing sexual images relating to another previous partner. So let's call it as it is. We mean revenge porn. So this is somebody who has obviously been given particular photographs, and then as opposed to just getting rid of them when the relationship's over, or I don't know, keeping them so you can have a look at them from time to time but not showing anybody else, this guy wants to use it to hurt that person. So he's released that image so that other people can see it, to humiliate that person, to make them feel powerless, to make them feel violated. That's sexually predatory, and again, it speaks volumes about the kind of perpetrator we're dealing with. In 2017, he admitted to breaching a restraining order relating to the same victim that he was charged for with the sexual images. So he's not consequential. He's getting charged again because he's not following the guidelines that he's been told to follow after he has been charged with other crimes. Of course, it's very unlikely he would be telling Holly any of this, because it doesn't paint you in a good light, does it? And it gives that person ammunition, because if Holly had realised what kind of a perpetrator she was dealing with, the minute that the red flag had occurred, she'd have probably thought, I need to get out because this man is criminal and now he's doing the same thing to me. The court were shown the CCTV footage because it was damning. First of all, they were shown the CCTV footage of Holly's last sightings, but then they're shown Metson carrying the shopping bags from his flat to the car. And the absence of Holly from that point onwards speaks volumes. Because clearly she would have come out of the flat. She was seen going into it, but she never did. She never came out aside from in those carrier bags. They also heard from the pathologist who carried out the autopsy on Holly's remains. They found 224 separate body parts. And those, as I mentioned earlier before, that weren't actually found were a part of Holly's heart, part of her lungs, part of her kidneys, 2 ribs, and also the end of 2 fingers. And the fact that he's cut the ends of the fingers, again, what is that telling you? It's telling you that he believed that maybe if you could get rid of the fingers at the end, it would be more difficult to actually locate who this person was if a body was found 10 years down the line or 2 years down the line, because the fingertips aren't there for fingerprint analysis. So he's thought about this. It's rudimentary. He was never going to get away with it, but he's thought about getting away with it. He just hasn't got the sophistication and capability. And also, investigations are so sophisticated these days that it's highly unlikely the killing of your partner is ever going to be something you can get away with. When the pathologist looked at her body, she could see that there were certain wounds that indicated she'd been stabbed. So Aspdom, the prosecutor, told the court that Metson's actions were truly gruesome. I don't think we need to have that highlighted. It's obvious from what I've told you so far. Now, the bite mark, bear in mind, that was physically present on Metson. The prosecution put it to the court that Holly was stabbed 4 times after being initially grabbed by Metson and placed into a headlock. And that's why Metson had the bite mark on his arm when the police came to search the flat. He, of course, then falsely claimed and tried to do reputational damage to Holly, saying that he was the actual victim of domestic abuse, which is ludicrous. But again, people like Metson will try everything to get out of accountability and responsibility. It's as simple as that. The experts came in and testified that this would have been caused because Holly would have been trying to fight against Metson's, what they said was a vice-like grip, as she was knifed in their bedroom. And when it comes down to the difference between male and female bodies, a smaller guy can overpower a bigger woman. It's just the way that we're built. So even though she would have been trying to fight back, he would have been able to overpower her, and also the fact that he'd have had her in a chokehold, that would have rendered her in a situation where she was entirely vulnerable, and the only thing she'd have been able to do was indeed bite him. The court heard victim impact statements, because there are so many victims in this case. Annette Bramley, Holly's mother, she described Metson as an evil monster. She then looked at him directly and she told him, "You've condemned my family to a life sentence of grief." She said, "The heinous way in which Holly was murdered and dismembered has left us in such unimaginable pain. The pain of losing a child is indescribable and something no parent should ever have to go through. The thought of Holly's last moment being filled with fear and pain is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives." Calling Metson an evil monster, I think, is an understatement. I don't think I have the words to describe this kind of human being. He's horrendous. I understand as well Holly's mother saying that they've had their family shattered and broken, because that is indeed how it is when a child is killed in such a traumatic way. Metson, when she literally directed this to him, showed no reaction whatsoever. None. Because, of course, he's emotionally a rock. And I think it's quite challenging to be in a court scenario as a perpetrator. I accept that. I appreciate that people know when they're a perpetrator, everyone's looking at them. But I also think that as a human being, to hear a mother talk of their indescribable pain and loss, to hear a mother direct words towards you, at least have the good grace to look and to react in accordance with an expected scenario that plays out for most of us, which is to just look sad, to just look remorseful. But he doesn't, because maybe that's the really hard part of this to digest. Maybe it's that he has no remorse whatsoever. She also said that she hoped that he would receive a whole life sentence, and damn straight I would wish that as well, because this guy should never walk our streets again. Now, Metson was actually due to be sentenced on the same day, on the 5th of April, but Judge Hurst actually adjourned the proceedings because there was a report that had found that Metson has autistic spectrum disorder and also a history of learning difficulties. So therefore, they wanted to look into that more deeply. That makes sense. Anything that's a mitigating factor should certainly be explored. So then we get to the sentencing on the 8th of April 2024. At this point, Metson was jailed for life with a minimum sentence of 19 years and 316 days. So basically coming up for 20 years. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's a relatively lenient sentence. We're talking about a man who, for no reason whatsoever, murdered his partner and cut her into numerous pieces and tried to get away with murder as well. This is not a man who's shown accountability. It's not a man who's shown responsibility. It's not a man who's shown remorse. 19 years and 316 days. It feels like cold justice, if I'm honest. And I know that that doesn't mean automatically he's going to get out. I understand it may be that he never walks the streets again, but I'm not so sure we should ever leave a window open when we're talking about a perpetrator of Metson's level. So when the sentencing hearing occurred, Judge Simon Hurst said it was an aggravating feature that Metson never gave a reason for how and why he killed his wife. So he's not even complied and answered the basic questions. Why did you do that? That is a completely reasonable thing to expect a perpetrator to answer. In fact, maybe if a perpetrator can't answer that, I don't know, don't ever let them out. That would be a really good starting place. I get that people believe that people should have second chances. I appreciate it. I believe people should have second chances at times. But I'm saying, if there is a perpetrator who has done something of such a high level gravity crime that we're talking about today, totally unprovoked, to a vulnerable girl, young woman who had had her animals murdered before, who had been enduring this horrendous coercive control. And even when he does the final ultimate betrayal and murders her, and then absolutely abuses and humiliates her corpse by cutting her into so many pieces that her family basically got her back in bits and could not see her again, never got to kiss her forehead goodbye. If you're not willing to answer basic questions like why, then how are you ever going to be safe? Because if you don't know the why, then anybody could become a victim. If I can't answer the question why, then I can't be safe around anybody. Because I don't understand myself. I don't understand my own motivations. And yeah, it might be horrible to actually have to tell people the truth and go, well, I did it because I wanted to. I did it because I got some kind of enjoyment out of it. I did it because she annoyed me. Maybe I didn't get the right chip muffin for my tea and I decided to snap. Yeah, it makes you a terrible person. But at least it gives insight into the actions. If you can't give insight into the actions, then maybe you haven't got insight at all. If you haven't got insight at all, you shouldn't be free, because you will be a problem to our society time and time again. The judge also said Holly's family and friends will never know how and why she was killed. He said the fact that Holly was cut into 224 parts was also a major aggravating feature, and there was no way his autism could explain this. So the idea that autistic spectrum features led to him going out and cutting his wife into 224 parts is just BS. Listen, you can be a psychopathic serial killer murderer and also be somebody with autism. Being somebody who is criminal does not mean that you will not also have comorbidities with other issues. You're still an evil POS. Simple as. Let's just call it as it is. The judge said the number of parts was far from necessary to remove Holly's parts from your flat. He also said that although the exact events of the 17th of March were not known, it was clear that Holly had bit Metson after he put her in a headlock. He said, you killed Holly by stabbing her 4 times. You then moved her to the bathroom where you dismembered her with a number of tools, and there were a number of tools that they found at the house. Judge Hurst said that Metson then went to the village of Bassingham a week later after paying Hancock a certain amount of money to help him dispose of Holly's remains. The judge said it was clear from family statements that Holly was a beautiful and kind young woman whose murder had left a void for her loved ones. And I think that's an understatement, isn't it? Because you never really get to fill that gap. That void is something that is expansive in nature. When it came down to his sentencing remarks, he said, it is plain that Holly was a much loved young woman. She's described by her mother as beautiful, kind, and loving. It's also plain that Holly's friends have been left with a void that will never be filled in their lives. He also expressed a lot of sympathy for Holly's family and said one of the things they did was acted in such a dignified way, the way they carried themselves in court, because they could have acted outrageously in court, couldn't they? I mean, they had reason to be outrageous when it came down to being in the room with the murderer of their loved one, but he commended them for just being really dignified in the face of such horror. Speaking outside of the court, the officer in charge of the case, DCI Jennifer Lovett, who works for Lincolnshire Police, they read out a statement and said, today, Nicholas Metson has been sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff to serve 19 years and 316 days for the murder of his wife, Holly Bramley, and also for perverting the course of justice. Metson's behaviour was barbaric. Not only did he murder his wife, but he also sought to dispose of her body in such a way that she could not be laid to rest. He tried to cover his tracks by telling friends of Holly that she had harmed herself and then had been taken away by a local mental health team and had run away to Manchester to be with friends. He also tried to maintain that he was a victim of domestic abuse. Metson then paid his friend Hancock to assist him in the disposal of Holly's body. When confronted by Lincolnshire Police, Metson continued his web of lies. But after initial inquiries were conducted and his accounts began to unravel, he was arrested for murder. She added, Holly was only 26 years old when she died. She believed that she was in a safe and loving relationship when she married Metson in 2021. However, he betrayed that belief. He took her future and life away from her in a callous way. She also said that she knew that nothing they could do would ever bring Holly back, but that she felt that maybe this sentence could bring a sense of closure for Holly's family. Holly's sister, Sarah Jane Lindop, also gave a statement outside court following sentencing, which she described as a milestone in the process of our grief and healing. The full statement from Holly's family read like this.
Today is a mixture of emotions for us as we see that justice has finally been served after losing our vibrant, happy and affectionate daughter, sister and auntie in such a barbaric and heinous way 12 months ago. The loss of Holly is still raw as we come to learn more and more of what happened to her before and after her tragic death. Today is by no means closure, but it is a milestone in the process of our grief and healing.
Our dear, sweet Holly was a beautiful, caring, innocent soul who had a kindness and warmth that affected everyone she met. She loved to sing, dance. She had a passion for animals and was rarely seen without a smile on her face. Her vibrant spirit and infectious laughter filled our lives with joy. She was truly special. She adored her younger brothers, nieces and nephews and wanted nothing more than to become a mother herself one day. She wanted children of her own, to dote on and to shower with love. She has so many family and friends who love her, who are now left feeling truly devastated that she is no longer here to live the long and happy life she deserved. We miss Holly so much, our hearts are broken. But if anything, we need her death to highlight that domestic abuse is not okay. If she'd recognised that this was what she was being subjected to, we may have had her home with us. Let's make domestic abuse everyone's business for Holly's sake. Thank you. When it came down to Hancock being sentenced, who was obviously an accessory in removing Holly's body and dumping Holly's body, they found evidence from Metson's mobile phone that showed that he'd offered Hancock money for a job during the early hours of March the 25th. And the next day, an absolutely incriminating message was found on Hancock's phone stating, "I just got £50 for disposing of a body." So he knew. He knew. And he accepted that blood money. So he also got sentenced on the 8th of April 2024. He was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months imprisonment. He actually got 2 years and 6 months for the disposal of the body charge. But it is absolutely harrowing to me that he knew, and yet he still went ahead and did what he did. Just a side note as well, Holly's mum is apparently training to understand domestic violence more. Clearly, there is an intention there that Holly's life and loss will leave a legacy that eventually will help others. And I always find it awe-inspiring when families do this kind of thing. I think it's awe-inspiring that families survive these kind of losses and then do their best to bring back into sharp focus the human being that no longer is present, but whose absence is always present. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I'm sure a lot of you will have heard about this case and have wanted to know more information. I have given you as much as I could find. If any of you know anything else, please do add in the description below and tell me your thoughts and feelings, because Holly Bramley was a lovely young woman. She did everything to be a loving wife. She was a connected person of a really important, loving family. And yet here we are, dealing with not only her brutally losing her life, but her perpetrator going down for what I would say is an unreasonably short amount of time in comparison to the gravity of his actions. Let me know. You might disagree, you might agree, you might think, you know what, Em, you're onto something with that idea of the Russian prisons. Maybe that could be an idea to let Vlad and his mates pop over and see how he could school some of our systems. Just throwing it out there. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I'll see you again next time. Look after yourselves, guys.